Hey people, Basil here from Techno Talk. Here's Java tutorial number 5. I think it's 5. I don't know, I haven't done one in a few days. Yeah, it should be number 5. We're going to be going over loops, and loops are a very important part of programming. And First off, before we get started, I hope you don't mind the promotion, but on my other channel that I'm a big part of, Havoc Gamers, I uploaded some Call of Duty Black Ops gameplay and a commentary, and it's pretty beast, so you should go and watch that, and then come back and do this. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started with those ifs. They're a very important part of programming, especially in Java, and we're going to be going over, 3 different types of loops in this tutorial, hopefully. We're going to be going over while loops, do while loops, and for loops. And these are 3 loops that, if done correctly, will do the exact same thing, only you can do it different ways depending on the condition, depending on the situation, and what you want to actually do. So we're going to create a new class in my project tutorials here, and we're going to go ahead and call it loops, construct main method, all that fun stuff that we already know how to do. And remember in the last tutorial when we learned about input and how that's really useful, because that's how you'll find out how information will change depending on what the user inputs. Well, we're going to forget that we learned that for a second, and we're just going to go ahead and set variables, their values, just to make things easier. So let's start with while loops. I usually don't use while loops or do while loops as often. I'm more of a for loop guy, but then again, you may want to use different types of loops for different situations, so I'm going to go ahead and go over all of them. So let's go ahead and create an integer x and integer y, and let's make x equal to 0 and y equal to 10. So we already learned how to do this, right? This is creating a variable x and a variable y, and we're saying that they're integers and their values are 0 and 10. And of course, if we were using a scanner, we could make it so that the user inputs what the value is instead of setting it here, but for now we'll just say that x is 0 and y is 10. So the way that a while loop works is, well, first off, the keyword while is what you want to type, and it'll turn purple in Eclipse to show you that it's recognized as a command. And then you'll do an open and close parentheses, and inside of these parentheses you want to have a condition. Remember when we did if statements, actually if statements are right here, and we did if and then a condition, and a condition is basically just a variable, and then some sort of comparison, whether it's less than, greater than, equal to, whatever. So it's the same thing with what am I doing? It's the same thing with the while loop, except that it's going to do something different, but the way you type it would be the same. So if we want to say that while x is less than y, and then we do open a little bracket, and then it'll close the bracket for us, so that we're saying this is our block of code for the while loop. So what we're going to do is we're in this block of code for the while is what we're going to want it to say while this is true. So let's just do system.out.println, have it say x is less than y, because we're so creative here at Techno Talk. Okay, so basically what this is saying is that as long as the value of x is less than the value of y, it will say this. Now, that sounds very similar to the if statements. The difference is that the if statement will check if x is less than y, and then it'll do everything in the code once. The while loop, it'll check if the condition is true, and then it will do this, and then it will go back and check if it's true again, and do this again. So really, if we were to run this, as you'll see in a second, it will be an infinite loop, and it'll say x is less than y an infinite number of times. So let's just stop that. So if we wanted to say it 10 times, for example, so we want to say this 10 times, we could copy it and paste it 10 times, but why do that? That's defeating the purpose of the loop. The thing is that you can use a while loop to do this for you, because so we want it that it'll check this condition, it'll say this, and then after that, after it says whatever we're telling it to say, we can say x plus plus, semicolon. Now what this is pretty much saying, this looks more complicated than it is, by the way, is it's saying that it's going to add 1 to x. Whenever you have plus plus, you're adding 1. So it's really like saying plus 1, but in programming it's not like that. You would say plus plus, and that's pretty much saying add plus 1. So every time it loops through this, it's going to add 1 to the value of x. So that means that the first time it'll run it, x will be 0, y will be 10, and it'll say this. I mean, the first time it'll run it, it'll say that. Second time it'll run it, x will be 1 because we've added a 1 to it. It's still less than 10, so it'll do this. And then the third time it'll be 2. So it'll do it every time until x eventually, as you add 1 every time, will be equal to 10, and it will no longer be less than y, and it will stop running. So if we ran this program, as you can see, it would just say it 10 times and stop. Is that 10 times? It doesn't seem like 10 times. 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's 10 times. Okay, so it will say it 10 times and it'll stop. So this is the first program that we're running, and we're going to do 2 other types of loops that should do the same thing. So the second type of loop is a do-while loop, which is very, very similar, and it'll do the same thing. The difference is that it'll do whatever okay, first let's write it. So the keyword is do in this case. So, you know, a while loop is while, a do-while loop has do and a while in it, and then a for loop would have for. So do is the keyword here, and you don't put anything parentheses or anything. You just make a block of code, and you'd want it to say something. So system.out.println, and we want it to say that x is less than y. Oops. There we go. Okay, so we want it to say that x is less than y, and then outside of the block of code, outside of the brackets for this, we'll have a while, and we'll put our condition x is less than y, and we're going to put a semicolon. Usually you don't put semicolons after conditions, because, well, really you don't put semicolons after loops or if statements. As you see here, you know, you put an if and then you're creating a block. But when you're doing this while, you're not actually creating a block of code. It's actually more of a statement. The do is what's creating it. So the do has these blocks, and it's going to say this, and then it'll do this, and then it'll check the condition. So basically, this is doing the same thing that the while loop did. Actually, first we need to say x plus plus. Good thing I caught that, or else it would have been infinite. But the difference is that when you do a do while loop, it's always going to run the code at least once. So it'll do it at least once, no matter what the condition is, no matter what x and y are, it'll do it at least once, and then it'll check it, and then it'll keep going accordingly. So if x was not less than y, then this should only run once. As you see, it only said x is less than y once. But if this was still 0 and the condition was still true, it'll still run it 10 times. And that's because it's really doing it at least once, and then it'll continue to do it depending on the condition. So that's a do while loop.